And the assignment, there's a JSlider Events and GUI Principles assignment. I gave you till midnight. In case we don't get it exactly all done today, you have this evening to complete it. Okay, and what we're going to be doing here is you're going to be building this little user interface, and then you're not going to give me the zip files, you're going to share the GitHub. So we're going to get to the GitHub as well. So I'm going to go over to my Eclipse now and start a new project. New Java project. Give it the name, I'll call it Sliders and Text Boxes. I'm not getting hungry for White Castle all of a sudden. Don't know why. Love White Castle. Okay, and in my project, I'm going to close all these extra things down. This was stuff I was working on last night. I'm going to create a JFrame. I can right-click, New, Other, or I can go click on the little icon up there. But I can also do New, Other, and go to the Swing Designer part. JFrame, give it the name. I like to call mine JFrame Main. And here's my JFrame. Double-click on the tab to bring it up to be the main. Put in a comment. I've got some auto-commenting going in my Eclipse setup, but I'm going to go ahead and put in here demonstrate use of sliders interacting with text boxes, text fields, and vice versa. The other way around, TextField working with a slider. Never forget comments. That's one of the first things, that is the first thing I look at when I'm looking at your homework. Did you put in a comment, first of all, with your name and a short description? Hey, Peter. Okay, so in the design view, now I'm going to create my slider. I'll make a nice big JFrame. I'll increase the size. I'm going to go with the absolute layout. Always choose your layout first. It avoids confusion. Select the absolute layout. Hover over your JFrames panel and click. You don't know it's absolute layout unless you look carefully over here in your properties of your frame. You will see a layout set up over here in the property somewhere. Created a JFrame. Set it to be absolute layout. And now let's bring over a slider. Let's see, I've got a slider here, JSlider, and I'll go put it over here across the top. I picked absolute layout, yes, absolutely. Okay, well that looks okay. I can adjust my slider. I didn't add JPanel, I just hovered over it and added absolute layout. And I made it a frame. Over here in the components, this is helpful to see what components you have in your program. Now let's create the vertical slider. All right, let's help you out here. Let's see what's going on. You got your main. Okay, over here in Designer. Come down here. Grab that crowbar. You can also there we go. There we go. Now click on a slider. Yeah, and then click on it once. And then click, oh, wait. What was that? Choose absolute layout first. And now you have to hover over it and click absolute layout. We did? Okay. Okay, now slider. There we go. Yeah, I just added the slider, and so far I'm going to make my slider nice and wide because I want to display tick marks. How do you display tick marks, you ask? Well, come over here and look in your properties of your slider as it's selected, and look here, I can turn on paint labels, paint ticks, and I'm not going to turn on snap to ticks. But that will not do anything unless I come over here and also set the minor tick spacing to have a value other than 0. If my tick spacing has 0, I won't see my ticks. And we want to see the ticks. So let's make my tick spacing, my minor tick spacing, let's make it 5. And let's make my major tick spacing, how about 20? So before doing anything else, let's just run it and see how this looks. Yeah.
You chose 5?
Yeah, I chose 5 for my minor ticks.
Okay.
Anything other than 0, feel free to experiment with what that does. And major tick spacing I set to be 20.
You said no snap to tick.
And I did not turn on snap to ticks. And once you deselect it, you actually will see what it intends to appear as up here. As soon as you turn those on and deselect your slider, it shows what it plans to look like. But it's not exactly the same. Let's run it and see how close we are to what it's exactly going to look like. We're pretty close. Bring this over here and I can compare. It's got a little better 3D look. The numbers are bold. And it's, yeah, I guess it's about the same dimension. Sometimes it doesn't look at all like what it's looking like on the screen. Okay, so I'm happy with that, and I can grab that. We'll go with the default 0 to 100 values. So I see it working. No event handlers added. Now the question is, how do I make a vertical slider? Well, let's see here. There's no other slider available. You look there first. Well, okay. Let's just make a slider, and maybe there's a way I can turn that into a vertical slider. Let's see. What could we find here? I changed my minor ticks to 5 and major to 20, and see how the major works? That's where the number appears. Oh, look here, orientation. If I change my orientation to vertical, it will now work as a vertical slider, and it has to think for a while before it will actually do it. I maybe have to deselect off of there. It will show vertical in a minute. Yeah, maybe. Well, I'm going to turn on my paint labels because I do want them true for that as well, and paint ticks. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to play with the major tick spacing. I'm going to make this major tick spacing. I'm going to make that 10, and the minor tick spacing. I'm going to make that 2, and see how that looks. And let's come back and click on here and see if it appears correctly. Boy. Oh, here's what happens. It did turn into a vertical scroll bar or slider, but now it makes me have to adjust it. I thought one time when I'd done this, it actually had turned it tall and narrow on automatically. But I have to manually come over here and adjust its position. And put it anywhere on your screen. Sometimes it'll, depending on your application, you might like it over in a separate little box. For this one, we might have something in the middle reacting to our slider. Now let's run this, make sure it behaves how we expect. Oh, look at that. It looks a little nicer than that. Flat blue. I think it might look better to actually make the major ones narrower up here and these ones a little further apart. These are going to get packed in because it's narrower. So I'm going to adjust my major ticks on this one. I'm going to make that one be 20. And on this one, I'm going to set the major ticks on that one to be 10. Because that one has lots of room to type. And I don't see the effects. What did I do wrong with that one? Let's see. Oh, I actually made it 209, not 20. There we go. Now it's looking better. Sometimes it's a little scary. Sometimes if you have an error anywhere in your code or you mess something up, you may see the designer it doesn't know how to parse your code and it'll just disappear on you. That's when the undo is very helpful. Yeah.
Shouldn't the top one be 10?
Yeah, I meant that to be 10. Why didn't it go to 10? Let's see, 10. Enter. There we go. Okay. Now we have the slider set up. Before worrying about the action handlers, let's make room and let's decide where we want to actually display the value for the slider. And this is your choice. And at this point, you would maybe look at other designs of sliders and see where they put theirs and kind of go with the same with their style. But I'm going to go with, I think I'm going to put it here on the right side and at the bottom. So I'm going to go now, create a JTextField. I'm going to place it down here. I'm going to get it a little narrower. I'm going to give it a default value of what I know the sliders start at. And so I'm going to put 50 because I know my sliders, their starting value is 50. And I'm typing a 50 in there. And I'm also, oh, that's a JTextField. And I'm going to center the text. I think centered text in the JTextField looks pretty nice. Now I'm a little lazy, so rather than do that all over, I'm going to copy and paste it after I get this set up. So Control C, Control V, and drag the new one to where I want to put it for this slider. And I think I'll put it right there. At this point, I'm going to run and see that they show up right. And then I'm going to get ready to add the, oh, look, I made that too short. It's behind that one. Let me go see if I can bring that forward. I think I can right-click, order, bring to front. In the text, make sure to hit enter maybe to get to show. Sometimes it doesn't behave exactly for you until you're done with the entry or you hit enter to verify.
Is it JTextField?
Yeah, JTextField. Oh. Now I'm also, while I'm adjusting this, I'm going to give that a title. I'm going to give that a nice title: Sliders and TextFields.
If you put it too close to the slider,
now at this point, it's all showing up nicely. And let's make sure. Yeah, now it's in front. I did the right-click change order. Did you notice? Over here is also controlling the layer location. It's just not only orders my code in this way, but it also means this will be ahead of this one when it's drawn. So just to order these nicely, I'm going to put the text field and then the slider. And I can change the order up here in my components. But I've got a problem. I don't know, over here I can't tell which is my vertical and which is my horizontal. I've got very generic names that aren't very meaningful. I want to change my variable names now because when I have my action handler, I want to know which JTextField I'm in and which one I want to modify. So I'm going to change this variable here, give it a new name. Let's call him, since that's this one selected, let's call him JText or TextField H or V for the vertical. And selecting on that text box or that slider, let's call him, instead of slider 1, let's call him slider V for vertical. We need to give them meaningful names when we're going to need to reference them from somewhere else in the code. If I don't care to reference, like most with labels, I often don't even ever need to reference them. I'll go with whatever variable name Eclipse happens to assign it. But even then, if you want your code readable, you might even want to make those labels meaningful variable names. Again, we're thinking about usability by someone else. I'm going to call him slider H because it's the horizontal slider, and I'll call him J or TextField H. TextField H, slider H. They show up here as well for a good reference. Now we have everything named right. Might as well run another test, make sure I haven't broken anything. It's hard to break it when you're only using Designer. Now I can really break it now when I come to use the code. You can click down here and you can select it and click the properties. I think I actually make it be able to come up here. Can I right click on that up there? And I guess it doesn't let me rename there. Yeah, I can rename it right there if I want. If you select it here or select it there, now here in the variable, you can change the name. Oh yeah, you can't have spaces in the name. Yeah, remember this has to be a legal variable name or we'll refuse to let you rename it. No spaces, have to use underscores instead of spaces, and I don't think it'll let you use hyphens. These have to be legal variable names. All right, now we're ready to, let's do the easy part. Let's have the text field reflect where the slider is. Okay, so let's just deal with one slider and one text box, and then the other two will be basically the same kind of thing. So we select our slider, and we want, yeah.
No.
Okay.
You didn't group it together?
I didn't see how to group them. I would like to be able to group them, but there's sadly not a way to group them. In other IDEs, maybe you can. You could actually, I think, put them in a separate panel to group them, but that's a little more painful. But a good idea, because then you can treat that as one component. So in order to now do something when I move the slider, we all know how to manually create action handlers, but we're going to let Eclipse help us do this. I can right-click on this, add event handler. Now comes some confusion. What event handler do I add? Man, there's so many listed there. How do I know? Well, you would think. And this is where you can experiment and put in your code. And this is what I will often do, because I want to try to figure out, how Eclipse helps me. And finally, you can figure out which one does it, but you have to try a bunch of things. Finally, I kind of go online and think, well, let's see here. Let's just do a quick little check. JSlider event. And usually I get pointed right to a very good site. If it sends me to the Oracle site, I can trust that it's probably pretty good help. Let's just see what they say. They give me a little demo. And right here I find out, oh, the change listener where is it? Here we go. State change. State changed. There we go. State changed is the event that I want to handle. And I learned that either by experimenting or by quick looking online for what's the recommended. And so I come over here. Let's go back to this. Event handler. There we go. State change. There we go. Change state change is the one I want. This is one of the more confusing part about handling events. In using Eclipse, there's just so many events that they can handle. And how do we know which one is the one that I care about? So state changed. Finally figured that out. Now it pops you into the code for an event handler, and let's zoom in on that a little for you. What do I want to do here? Well, let's put comments here what I want to do. Yeah, state change is the event handler, and we're going to put a comment. What's that? Oh, you right-click on it. Change, right, yeah, right-click change. Yeah. And what we're going to do is update the text field. And it's TextField H. Okay? Now, how do I get the value of my slider? Now, I know my slider's name is slider H, but I want to set, and this is the way I do it, I want to plan ahead for if I ever want to use this same event handler, I like to do it the same way each time. Rather than naming my variable slider H, here's what I like to do. I want to base everything I do in here on the most local information possible, and I have all the information I need in the change event E. And what I know is I know that I'm handling a slider event. So here's what I do. JSlider, I like to call the variable me, but that's my choice, equals JSlider of the event.get, event.get source. What this means is I know I'm a handler for a slider event. E.getSource gives me the object that generated that event. And the reason I like to do this is I might want to make an event handler for multiple types of the same object, and this lets me handle it no matter what slider generated this event. This is a great way to get what slider just got moved. I could have just used the variable slider H instead of me. Yes? When I did the right-click add event handler, you got that? Right inside your, did you get a state change code come up? Now in this case, I need to reference my horizontal text field. Yeah.
Your change event is for P, but in my case it's for argument.
Oh, okay. If it's arg0, you can change it to E or just use arg0 instead of E. Yeah. And I'm not sure why I'm using a slightly new version of Eclipse. Maybe the Oxygen Eclipse does it slightly different. But it does that variable name is completely flexible. Now we want to update the text field. Unfortunately, there's not a way for me to know from the event what text field to update. I have to go by the variable name here. So we do TextFieldH dot set text, and I need a string here. Well, my slider gives me a value as an integer. So in order to display it as a string, if I just tried me.getValue, is it going to give me an error? It doesn't know how to take an integer. Set text only can take a string. So what's the easiest way to turn an integer into a string? I could do toString. That's one way. Dot toString. That's not giving me autocomplete here. It doesn't know how to do autocomplete, but I think toString will work. Or an even easier way, empty quotes concatenated with an integer will turn it into an integer. And send it as an integer, send it as a string to my set text. This is what I like. It's less typing. Do you ever need to send an integer as a string to something that will only take a string? That's a double quotes, double empty quotes. Empty double quotes, I guess, is a better term. Now let's see if this works. And then we'll try to do it the other way around. When we change the text, move the slider. So, okay, let's help you with any errors. Let me run this and we'll make sure I don't have any errors. Don't see any red. And now, when I move this one, let's see. Yeah, it reflects that text up there. Did you find the error?
Yes.
Okay. And this is the way it works with GUI design. Little things like this, it takes a while to think it through the first time, get this all working. But as you do this multiple times, you'll get a lot better at this. Understand this whole event thing. Question? Okay. Let's check the errors before we get any further. While I help with the errors, now we want to add the event to the text field. Change the variable name. Otherwise, it's hard to figure out which one you change. Come to your select your field and change the variable name right there. That's where you want to get this name, this name, this name, this name. So click on that, and look at the text frame. Tell us make a text frame for text field H. Text field H. For our horizontal. Variable names don't really matter until we want to reference them. Then it becomes important. We want to have nice, meaningful names, again, making our code readable by others. Now at this point, I should also be, well, let's see, I've got a few comments there. I'm going to make it a little prettier. Give it a little white space so it's clear what I'm doing. Here's where I'm actually updating the text field. Getting the value from my slider that got the event. All right, now back to the design. I had a text field, and I set his text to be the slider that got moved.getValue, me.getValue. This is all I cared about doing. And what's nice about this designer, if I don't like the way that text looks, I can just come back here and adjust my font, change the color of things. My code that handles the setting of the value in the text field doesn't change. Okay, now let's go back. We need an event to attach to the text field. When I change the text field, move the slider. So just like I did the slider, I right-click, add event handler. This one, again, has tons of different actions. This time, it's the very first one, action performed. Sometimes the name doesn't, you think it would say like text changed. No, it's action performed is what gets the action. If I want more details, I can actually check the text as they're typing by handling key events. But I don't want to worry about key events right now. I want to wait until they enter text and then hit enter. That then will cause the event. So action performed, and it now will create an event handler. I'm going to do the same kind of thing. This time, casting the event.getSource or argv0 to be a text field. So text JTextField. I'll call it me equals type casting JTextField e.getSource. This, in parentheses, this means whatever you see on the right, treat it as though it were a text field. Typecasting, this is where typecasting comes in handy. Well, it had E there, so I used it. So if you don't get E there, you can change it to E if you like, and then, because remember, the variable name, that's determined by us. Yes, Peter? Okay, back in Designer, did you right-click, action performed, and then you, does it show that it's there? Let's take a look. Designer sometimes use that. Where's our text? There we go. Yeah, we got our slider. Well, yeah, because the variable change that argument, change that. There we go. So now the variable that got the event is and now that second one, that's going to be the action for the text field. So text field, action performed. Text field, action performed. Similar kind of thing. If this is called arg0, you can change it to an E to match my code if you like. And now, update slider to match the value. All right. So I know the name of my slider. What is it? Slider H. And let's see. Uh-oh, I got a problem. Slider H is declared here, but I want to use it here. I know his name is going to be Slider H, but see how he's not declared yet in my creation of my GUI? Here's what I have to do. I have to modify my code a little bit now. Yeah, I have to declare it above. So I copy that, and I basically go way above here, and I declare it up here. And I can make it private just like the other ones up above, but it doesn't really matter. I'm going to, yep. And then down here, I'm going to now, instead of JSlider, I'm just going to say slider H now equals new JSlider. Now I can refer to it from anywhere because I've declared it at the top. Now, Eclipse did it for me for these text fields, but it doesn't always do it for you for other components. So because I need to reference slider H, I have to move its declaration up above. And nice about this, designer doesn't break. Yeah, I left the JSlider slider H. I could have put private there, but I'm not going to worry about that. I want to get it working first. Now I can refer to my slider H now. I can do slider H dot set value. And it needs an integer. So now I have to convert what's in my text field to an integer. Do you remember how to convert a text to an integer? You got to do the parse int. So we got to do capital I integer dot parse int, and it takes a string which would be me dot get text. This now will update my slider to match the value typed into the text box. Now let's see if this works, and then we'll think about possible exceptions. But let's see if this works. Yeah. Okay, okay. Parse int. So I'm converting what was typed in the text box. Getting an error?
Well, then, if you have, we'll take your bill. I don't see any red over here. Oh, when you started running the game, well, what's the order there? We'll go to the top. Well, it should. That tab should be fired.
Poor Brandon is giving a runtime error. Let's see if I get a runtime error. Nope, no runtime error here. But Brandon's getting a runtime error. No pointer when you run. But no errors at compile time. That's interesting. Well, here's one thing. I create my text field. I set its text to 50. Make sure that you put a 50 in your text field, in your text box properties. I'm wondering if that might mess it up, Brandon. Yeah. Make what is a string? At the top of the screen, I made JSlider slider H. I declared it. Is that what you're asking? Now, I'm going to go ahead and make it private. The private doesn't really matter. I'm going to put private just because everything else is private. But the only reason that I need it up here is because I'm referring to it from a code that's above where I'm actually declaring it. I'm thinking, Brandon, check your design. Make sure that you set this to be 50 and that your slider value, its initial value, is also 50. Otherwise, okay? And you can make sure about that in the value part of each slider. I'm wondering if that's your problem.
Well, it was fine before.
Okay.
It's right back to it.
Well, at this point, I want to make sure that we can get. We got a time. Oh man.
We have 8 minutes left.
Okay, we want to get GitHub now to have this code. Don't worry about the other slider at this point. Let's make sure to get the GitHub working. So sign into GitHub and make a repository. There's 2 steps, and I'll go through the steps for GitHub. We have to first create a repository that will be local to our machine. Then we connect it to a GitHub repository. So I'm going to go over to GitHub and make a new repository. And I have a whole gobs of repositories. I've made a special organization called CS315 just because I'm creating a bunch of repositories while I go through these projects. So I'm going to create a new one right now. And the name here is your own choice. I'm going to call it Slider Project. Slider and Text Project. In GitHub, you have to make it public unless you're paid subscription. I'm going to call this Project in class 180411. And I'm going to initialize with a README. I'm going to add a get more and make sure it's a get more of Java. Basically, this is kind of just setting it up. If anyone uses the get more information, they'll know this is a Java project. And I'm going to put a license. I like the GNU General Public License 2. You can pick whatever you want, just to show you that those are optional. It makes it nice if you have the README. And now at this point, I'm creating a repository that's pretty much just empty, but it has a README in there. I'm not requiring a README. Just the main thing here is that we get this repository filled with our code now. Okay? So I've created the repository, and now I can go up to my repository here. I'm going to zoom up. If you want to put a get more, that's fine. Now the important thing is, once I've created it, I need the clone or download link. That's what I'm going to use to link later on. So once you have the repository created, that button should appear. And then copy that, Control, select all, or this little guy right here, copy to clipboard. That will now, when we go later on in Eclipse, now it's ready to connect to our repository. Now, if you have created a repository for other team members to work with, if they have permission to write, they will also be able to change your repository. So now I come back to my project, and I'm going to get ready to create a local repository. There's 2 steps. I'm going to go ahead and double-click on my tab so I can see my Package Explorer over here. Here's my project. I'm going to right-click, Team, Share Project. What this does, it creates a repository on your computer. It doesn't send it to GitHub yet. It creates a repository. You have to have a repository locally before you then can push that repository up to GitHub. So right-click Team or right-click Project, Team, Share Project, and see how we're going to now create a repository, not in the frowns upon creating it in the parent folder. So we're going to go create, and it's going to create your repositories in you. It should be your ydrive.git, and do slash and then the name. I'm going to call this sliders and text. Right click team share project, create button here to create the repository. Give the repository a name. In your it likes to put it in your Git folder under your username. Sliders and TextFields. Yeah, you're creating a local repository. And before you do finish, it shows you where that's going to be in your local folders. Mine's in my C drive because I don't have the Y drive on my laptop. Yes? Oh, let's see here. You're not seeing right click project, team share. Here's your project. Okay. Oh, we've already created a repository. Let's go to view. Sorry, now window. Show view. Other. Go on and hit. And let's show the repository. Looks like you have that already as a repository. That's why it's showing it. So you already have their local repository. Okay.
I don't think I did it. Because it always sits on the easy.
Okay, go to window. Window. Show view other. Git repositories. And what this is telling me is you already have a local repository. You already created a repository.
I didn't set them back to.
Well, because you already had a repository. You had created if you created this repository already, you've already been through these steps before. And you did not realize what you were doing.
No, I just did it. When you were saying that.
You created the repository?
I don't think I clicked.
Because once you create the repository, it's never going to want to ask you to create it again because it already sees it as a repository. Now here's the tricky part. And I'm saving all my changes, yes. Now, to make the repository now, go to GitHub. Here's the deal. I go now back to team, and now I show all this showing up. And also down here, I will see there's a Git staging window that I can see. Let's see if this works now. Right click, team, commit. And I guess I have to stage my changes down here. I can select all the things in my staged changes by just clicking the plus or dragging them down to my staged changes. I have to give it a commit message or it won't let me commit it. So I'll call this my initial commit. And I like to do the commit and push all together. Commit and push. And because I had copied my GitHub link before, it shows up automatically up here. One thing I'm going to do here in the next, just to avoid any errors, if I choose force overwrite, this will make sure that it does send the code up there and it will overwrite anything that may already happen to be there. Without this checked, sometimes I've got an error come back and I don't get all my code up there. And I'm going to have to click next and finish. And I think we're out of time, and I don't want to. Yeah, and that's where now you give it your user that you had with GitHub in order to push it up there. Yeah. And once you see that message, you can go to GitHub and actually you'll see your code up there. Write it down here. Oh, well, you have program running? That lucky red around that area. Are you running your Eclipse Windowbuilder? It says another process has a handle on this file.
I have a question. Are we now logged in? Are we now logged in on this computer now? Is there a way to sign out?
Well, it won't remember your password, so you can close it and it will ask you again next time. Unless you store your password in Eclipse, it doesn't. Oh, you're doing all of yours. So we want to do just your project.
No, it's
Okay, well, let's try committing that. See if we can get that done. And use your link from GitHub to where's your GitHub. There's your .third. Down to .third. And content. There you go. There you go. Now it's going to get you the password that's kind of GitHub. And now we're going to do the next. You can't change it unless you sign it down. Check forward, right? And this one. Yeah, the task didn't work. Looks like it's working. Let's see now. Oh, didn't like the month. Okay, but otherwise that's the thing. You got it almost there. I got it. Thank you. And then once you have it, just share with me your GitHub link in the assignment, and then I can pull your code.
You want us to share the link with you?
Yeah, in the assignment, just give me the link to your GitHub.
The one we copied to the
Yeah.
clipboard?
Yep. And now think about how that would work for a team now. As you work with GitHub as a team, your team members will not see your changes until you've sent them to the remote GitHub. A commit only sends it to your local repository.